Now let us move on to our next panel discussion with the topic of the year, 5G deployments from planning to reality. Your panel outline would be 5G economics and use cases, lessons learned from initial 5G deployments, 5G serving the next wave of traffic growth, importance of fiber backbone in 5G deployments, and the gaps in solutions for complete commercial deployment. And your panelists, please welcome on the stage CTO from TELUS, Dr. Ibrahim Gedeon. Vice President, Global Wireless Networks, Marketing and Solutions for Huawei, Dr. Mohamed Madkour. Consulting Director for B2B and Strategic Marketing, Sofrecom, Mr. David Erlich. CTO from Nokia Middle East and Africa, Mr. Aji Ed. Vice President of Service Providers for Middle East and Africa, Commscope, Mr. Femi Oshiga. And Chief Legal and Regulatory Affairs Officer for Etisalat International, Dr. Kamal Shehadi. And your moderator, Regional Head of Middle East, Vodafone Partner Markets, please welcome Mr. Johannes Hummer.
We have here people from operators as well as infrastructure providers and consultants, so it should be quite right. I would like to start with the first question and hand over to each of you. 2019 was the year of the 5G. What did each of your companies achieve in terms of 5G deployment in this year?
Okay. Good morning, and thank you very much for this opportunity to be part of this panel discussion. So I'm Aji Ed from Nokia. I think from Nokia perspective, if you ask me, it was a fantastic year for 5G. It was exciting, eventful. If you put in shorter words, it was very eventful because we had a lot of opportunities to work around the world in different 5G deployments. We had a lot of success stories, which is some of them were like game-changing achievements in the past 1 year. So as we speak today, we have 50 commercial contracts in 5G, and 80 networks are up and running around the world. So that is across all the continents from the United States. If I just mention that with the latest launch, what happened in a couple of days back, we are one of the biggest suppliers in the United States, and also, of course, in the Europe, in the Middle East, in Asia, and it's across end-to-end. You know, one of the unique points about Nokia, how it is, how we are positioned right now, it's about the end-to-end product portfolio, what we have from Nokia side. So starting from the fiber networks to ReefShark-based our chipsets in the radios, of course coming to the FP4-based chipset in the IP routers. So it's about the whole end-to-end with the backhauling, with the cloud-native applications, and whatever you name it, because with all the automation, orchestration, and so on. Because 5G is not just a radio. It is much more than that. It's complete end-to-end. Yeah. So when it comes to Middle East, we have been working with almost all the operators in the Middle East, and our public references include operators in Saudi Arabia, in the UAE, and of course some of the other GCC countries as well. It is a fantastic year. We hope to continue this momentum.
Thank you very much. Ibrahim.
Are you sure you're done?
Yes.
So, yeah, as you guys all know, that 5G was coined in 2014 in Canada, right? So we're pretty proud of it. We don't have a 5G deployment because I like what Jane said earlier. 5G is about disrupting the business model. And to be honest, everybody's fighting over speeds and feeds. And for those who would like to know about that, we've achieved 30 gig. And we have on LTE 1 gig per customer, right? So I don't think it's a matter of just giving the speeds. We need to reinvent the business model. So the digital twin or the triplets, whatever you want to call it, it doesn't really matter. I think what we need to do as an industry is revisit where do we need to reinvent the digital business model and the process. And that being the case, there's a real models that require us not to go back and to the core, the whole notion of the core. So one of the things I'd like to talk about, you can't really invent new money. You're replacing somebody else's money. Thus, For us, no disrespect to the providers, we have two of them here, two great providers, Nokia and Huawei. You guys are making the money. For us, we're giving more speeds for less ARPU as telcos. So I think the key is to insert ourselves up the value chain. And to do that, we need to hit the services that require quick, low latency. For example, multiple cameras in a place like this, in an airport, autonomous vehicle, not the big thing. So that's, in a nutshell, I think we can do a lot of 5G use cases using 4G. But everybody is busy with the sex appeal of speeds and first deployments. So whoever starts making money off 5G, I will dedicate my next book to them, and they can share with me the recipe.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'm David Erlich from Sofrecom. So what's interesting with the introduction of 5G is that it's not standalone. It comes along with 4G, and every introduction has to cope with this mixity of 4G and 5G, which means that at the beginning, at the inception, you have a limitation in terminals, 5G terminals, on 5G footprint, and you have to have kind of dual marketing, which includes both 4G capabilities and 5G, which at the end of the day, which limits your imagination on 5G, which is presented as a premium of 4G. And if you look at it on asymptotical way, at the end of the day, you get a risk that your premium of 5G get exhausted by the time. And of onset, we see that 5G is sold as superior speeds, but at the end of the day, every actor of the market will have the same proposal value, and what happened to 4G might happen to 5G as well. If you look at the other use case, which is today used, is the one of fixed wireless access, which is sold along with fiber. But because fixed wireless access is an alternative to fiber, the packages which are there look more or less like fiber packages. So again, here, the marketing of 5G is, from the inception, at risk. So I think what's interesting is that the paradox of 5G and the way 5G can monetize and get a better success what happened to 4G is if we look at the corporate market, and especially the co-innovation which is today put in place by many operators. And here what's interesting, this co-innovation, it means that operators recognize that they are not able to do the marketing themselves, and they need to hear the customers and to build the services with the customers. So what's interesting with paradox with 5G, maybe for the first time, operators will ask their customers to do some marketing and to co-market the services as opposed to the previous way they used to do everything themselves. So 5G is maybe a new area for designing services for operators, and this is going to be a big change in itself.
All right, so first of all, pleasure to be back here in Dubai. I think from Huawei perspective, on top of what we do as a technology seller, no matter from infrastructure perspective or terminal perspective, I think what we're really proud of ourselves of what happened over the last year, 2019, is that all of our product line, all of our solutions are 5G oriented. And when we say that, because we do not want to downplay 4G or downplay any other part of the network, as we always say, and I'm quoting your words sometimes, which is there are a lot of more exciting things about 5G other than 5G radio or base stations. So in terms of that, I guess when you look at Middle East, that's something we're really proud of, because for the first time, I mean, Middle East now is a pioneer in 5G deployment, and I wanted to underline deployment so far, which is really great. And we're working hand in hand with the carriers here, given their vision and the ambition to really get some use case materialized about 5G, because to us, the key 5G by itself, I would say it just air interface technology or just a pipe. I guess what will make it exciting is the innovation about the use case, which is really right now what we're putting all of our effort in terms of our department organizations in Huawei is to how to facilitate those business case. In terms of, we had about 14 R&D centers, 36 joint innovation centers, all of our training centers, even all of our services engineering, it's all oriented towards finding that services and the growth that business ecosystem. To be honest, these things are not gonna come overnight. So we cannot ask and put pressure on carriers on how to make money, when is it gonna make money about 5G. It's all about finding the recipe, about growing and being passionate about certain use case and do it. Otherwise, the revenue and the economics of the business is going to be linear from 4G to 5G. We don't want it to be linear. We want it to be like, ramp up for that innovation. So we're really exciting. We're partnering with very much most of the operators here in the GCC area. We had more than 12 contracts in GCC, 8 live networks. Globally, 2/3 of the networks are powered by us. We're excited about the cell phones. 2 weeks ago, we had the first phone, 5G phone, that breaks the $500 mark, $470. Maybe that's the first phone I will get.
US or Canadian?
I'm not sure. It's there. It can be solved, but at least it's something very, very nice and affordable. So.
Did you say passionate or patient?
No, passionate. Because I cannot afford our foldable phone. It's $2,400.
No, I was talking about the operators being engaged.
Yeah. So things are very exciting, I guess. We need to all have the passion to make it work. So we need to empower 5G. We always talk about 5G is going to empower us, but we need to use 5G ingredients, I think.
Very true.
Come on.
Thank you. Look, this industry for decades has been at the forefront of bringing value to individuals, to societies, to communities. And we've heard stories even today, how the spread of mobile technology has worked to uplift societies, businesses, enable new business models, transform the way we live, the way we transact, the way we deal with each other. And with 5G, the promise is even, much greater, and it's going to be transformative. My concern is that with the way the conversation is going in almost every country that I follow, this discussion is unfortunately driven by the fixation on technology and not the service or the value added. And I think if we do not, as operators, stop and think, and if regulators and policymakers do not keep up with the technological changes, I'm ready to venture that those of us who work with telcos, instead of working for our shareholders, for our communities, our consumers, our societies, we will realize at one point that we are working for the vendors. And for the vendors in this room, I apologize ahead of time, some are on this panel, but I think this conversation at this point can no longer be driven simply by the vendors. And it's great that they're doing this, that they're innovating, they're enabling things that were not possible before. However, the reality is that the business model is not there for these services to be profitable, to generate the kind of returns that will justify the investments in the long run, and that will make this accessible to the people who actually need it, whether businesses and so on. It's great to think of applications to mining, to transport, to public safety. Some of these have an obvious way to generate income if given the pricing flexibility. And that is a big if. If anyone in this room thinks that regulators deal with 5G in any way that is different from the way they dealt with 2G and 3G, then we're not on the same wavelength. We're not talking about the same thing. And that, I think, I'll hope to come back to this. But the promise of 5G to be realized is going to take a much greater transformation at the policy and the regulatory level and at the level of society and businesses.
Perfect. Thank you. Femi.
I'd like to think Commscope is one of those pragmatic vendors that you would like to hear from time to time, because we see 5G, yes, as a pipe, but one that would provide these transformational services over a long period. And we don't see 5G will happen overnight. Yes, there are a couple of network launches, you can talk of contracts and stuff, but the real value to society, the way 4G has contributed to society is probably over a period of 4, 5, 6 years. So we would like to see ourselves as pragmatic in that sense, 1. 2, 5G, yeah, the technology is what it is, but it really is about densification. You need to bring the network assets to the closest possible wireless access point, right? And that involves a lot of
connectivity, very simple connectivity. We don't talk about fiber much, but perhaps we should. Power to those points, being able to access those points in the first place, whether it's a lamp site or in the middle of the city, on a street, and so on and so forth. Frankly, those issues are probably more difficult to navigate than the technology itself. What I would like to say about Commscope, you asked what we've done. I mean, yeah, we've worked with a lot of our partners in the industry. We've helped our partners prepare themselves for 5G. We've had a good year, both in terms of what they're doing on the wireless cell sites, condensing assets into one antenna, say, reducing the cabinets, reducing power, and so on and so forth, providing backhaul. But what we've also done, Commscope, is look at ourselves. So very recently, we've also transformed ourselves in preparation. So we now see ourselves as a vendor that looks at 5G and technologies such as 5G in terms of venue and campus. What can we do there? We look at it at broadband networks, whether it's DOCSIS or GPON. How do we connect these venues and campuses? Then we talk about outdoor solutions, which is only one portion, which is the 5G radio that a lot of us in this room tend to think of a lot, but it's only one portion. And finally, there was some reference to it earlier, the home, right? The real asset is to keep hold of that customer, ideally, from his home all the way and all day long. When he goes to work, he goes onto the macro cell site. When he goes to his office, is in some kind of venue of some sort. And then all that is connected. Keep his information in your data centers and provide value that way. So we try to transform ourselves to try, as the operators are thinking about these things too, we tell the story in that way. And frankly, like you said, it's not about technology, it's hitting on the right use case when it comes along. And there will be coming along we think in quantum steps. It wouldn't be sort of this gradual thing. Every now and again, there'll be something, and then the operator needs to be ready for that, deploy it, monetize it, and then move on to the next thing. And we've adjusted ourselves or prepared ourselves for that kind of move in the industry.
Thank you. So we have to change the gear because we have a limited time, and that was question 1. And I will change the rule here. The question 2 will go only to the operators, and 1 minute for the rest. Many 5G use cases have emerged, have they? What are the most important use cases for you around 5G, and how to earn money with 5G? Over to you, Hip.
So I think for us, I mean, to be honest, it'll be the same for almost everybody. There's 2 use cases. One is QoS and slicing. So we're able to merge networks that were purpose-built. For the first time, we could do them on a single network, public network, or joint public-private networks. That's one. The other one is the whole fact that you've decentralized the switching functions and the identity functions and the control functions. So those are the 2 things that we hope to make money. The only issue is we've never sold that as operators, so we have to look at our go-to market. So the technology we could prove with 4G, we need to look at the go-to market end-to-end, but more importantly, what are you going to price it at?
Absolutely.
I think what 5G really brings as one of the big disruption is advent of the quality of service, and especially as B2B customers are concerned, because it said that B2B is one of the greatest opportunity for 5G, is that B2B will, for the first time, really get from wireless services capabilities on quality of service capabilities with SLA. And this is what enterprises require as opposed to residential. The thing is, we are, again, is an interesting paradox, because if we look on fixed networks, which were usually the type of networks provided to enterprise to support their quality of service requirement, the trend has been going to another direction, where corporate customers have been using more and more internet with less and less quality of services, and have used virtualization techniques, especially SD-WAN, to complement and to supplement the lack of quality of service of the internet. So on the fixed side, customers have built and are building capabilities to get rid of the quality of service capabilities of the fixed networks. At the same time, in 5G, we try to introduce exactly the opposite, to say, hey, hey, we're coming with quality of services at last. So there will be an interesting race that, on one hand, to be sure that customers, corporate customers have not, let's say, get totally independent from the networks as far as quality of service is concerned, and really to look at the specific use cases where the wireless quality of services will be paramount to serve their requirements. So it's interesting. The question would be, is 5G really on time and not too late compared to what the enterprise customers already built, which means independence from the network capabilities? So it's an interesting challenge for the industry.
Thank you. Kamal?
Okay.
No, Kamal.
So regarding the use cases, I think you heard Hatem Douidar talk about that this morning. Public transport is the most obvious. There are public safety, public transport issues. That's probably what will be a major concern. I think in terms of the enterprise segment, I mean, there will be lots of use cases in different industries. I already mentioned transport. There's the port business, maritime business. We're lucky to operate in countries, and at least some of them, where these industries are eager to innovate, to introduce 5G. And so we're working with them in partnership, and I think that has actually transformed the outlook in the industry. Because if you look at, say, 2-3 years ago, most of us in this room would have said that the future of telecom is actually bleak. We're turning into a dumb pipe. Today, 2-3 years later, it's quite the opposite. We have to be much smarter, and we are able to adapt. We're able to offer these services, and 5G is important in that respect. But we started even with 4G technology, and I think the opportunities are much greater with 5G.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Actually, one short one.
Okay. I think difficult to pick one short use case, but obviously fixed wireless access is one of the existing use cases. But as my colleague Ms. Jane said, so we have several use cases in terms of smart factories, mining, oil industry, what we have here. I think this is my point of view. The use cases are still to mature, but this is where we see a lot of such different use cases in different segments.
Thank you. Mohamed?
I think if you are asking about the use case, there are tons of use cases. I think the issue now, or what we need to really work on, is how to translate these use case into a business case. All of them are now in trial phase, no matter whether it's for industries or consumer. But if you really look at the atomic capabilities of 5G in a nutshell, for a consumer, it's bringing the cloud to your pocket. That's basically it. For home, bringing the cloud to your home. For example, you have the robot, and then those are the applications for consumer. It all depends on, again, speed, capacity, latency. Those are the things. But the real opportunity will be in bringing the cloud closer to the enterprise or B2B, and the 5G by itself, again, is not going to solve it. There are a lot of use cases that needs 5G, edge computing, AI, big data analytics for sure. Those are what will make it happen. What are those? There are a lot of adjacencies, digital adjacency for each single problem. So number one, I think we need to look at the market issues, go down to find this issue and how to solve it. 5G has the capability to solve it, but how to get it materialized and how to make it happen. That's on top of what was mentioned about other use cases.
Thank you, Mohamed. Femi?
We think pragmatism has to rule. So there's a stat that I read the other day. Only about 35% of, let's take the case of mobile broadband, only about 35% of subscribers today around the world will be prepared to pay any more than 20% than their current rates for a 5G service. That kind of sets a boundary on what you can do or not do. That's one example. So you're going to have to sort of build business plans and work around that as a CTO or CFO or a marketing officer, because that's sort of your working range. I'll give you another example. In Germany, Commscope, we tried to work with a very major auto manufacturer to build a dedicated in-building private network that was 5G ready, was to evolve to 5G. Money was almost no object, beautiful prices, right? Services, we have the right people, it's Germany, Well, guess what? They wanted us to sign up to liabilities because now you're working in a factory where something could go wrong, and they wanted direct damages. I mean, that's where the business case collapsed. So they had to give in and say, no, we can't hold you, sorry, indirect damages as well as direct. They had to give in on the liabilities they were prepared to impose on us,
Yes.
and we had to be prepared to put it in more than just what we think of as managed services in our industry, right? So you find, again, it's not always just a technology, it's now having resources for that one project in that one factory, big as it was, yeah, to meet that demand. Now we have to replicate that, thousands of times around the world.
Yeah.
A lot has to change for that to be possible. We need a partner set up, the factories need to have their own engineering teams, their own setups and so on to accommodate all these changes. So I'm not concerned about the use cases, I'm concerned about making it happen and of course monetizing it.
Thank you. So I will merge questions 3 and 4. A huge volume of traffic.
Johannes, if we disagree, do we say it now or do we wait till after you ask the question?
If you want to disagree, especially with the last sentence, I can't blame you. Go shoot for it.
But no, it's not a disagreement. I mean, the question I asked my colleagues, is there anything we can't do on 4G today? So before we put the massive investments in 5G, other than the QoS, which is more LAN-ish, like the factory or public safety, there's only 2 use cases I see. Is there anything we can't do on 4G? If you have a gig or 500 meg? No, I'd love to be educated. This is what the panel's for. I mean, it's only money. Like, we spend $3 billion on capital, we make it 3.5 and add 4G.
Yeah.
Again, more, no, really. And by the way, we're doing the mining stuff with you guys.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's not a market. Like, we'll sell 3 mines, and then we'll go hungry.
Yeah.
No, really. I mean, sorry, Johannes, I just...
We promised fun.
There is a prize for leadership.
I would say, let's Huawei answer that question.
There is one interesting thing, that 5G is at least a capacity solution for 4G. So at least you get 5G, you must have 5G to get along with your growth of traffic. And maybe if we have a look on the sustainable goals, if you want to have a kind of mastering of your energy spent, of your carbon footprint, you must have 5G to bear with your data explosion. And at least it makes the basics
cheaper per bit
of your 5G business case. And then you will wait for investment in slicing and others to make...
David, with massive MIMO, you're screwed. Engineering, power, antennas.
Yeah, I will also talk about, obviously a lot of things you can do with LTE.
I think still we cut it now because I know that we have 2 more topics that we want to address, plus an extra topic. So, but we come back to this under the Q&A, I would say. A huge volume of traffic will be generated once 5G is fully deployed. How can this challenge be faced? Would have been 3. And 4, what role will fiber have in 5G area? As I think that they are related, I would say let's answer these 2 questions together. Over to you.
Okay. All right, I think I would like to maybe continue from what you were discussing before. I think if you look at the huge amount of traffic what is going to be generated, I think we need to look back and see what happened in 2019. What are the learnings from it? I think a few things which I want to share, at least from my perspective, because it's from the network point of view, not from the use case point of view. So network point of view, I think one of them definitely was the indoor penetration or indoor traffic. If you really look at it, I mean, obviously massive MIMO, I will talk about that. I mean, indoor traffic, if you look at overall, if you see it, most of the traffic, 60 to 70% would be indoor. And traditionally, with the amount of spectrum that we have in the mid-band and high band, there is a penetration problem. This is exactly where we need to tackle this. This was not handled in a systematic way in the 2019. Second, explicitly what you mentioned about massive MIMO. I think, in my view, a massive MIMO is not the single shop solution. I think we need to have radio perspective itself, we need to have multiple different variants. Massive MIMO, definitely you need it for certain capacity areas where you need massive capacity, right? Massive coverage. But there are other variants which are cost effective. This is the TCO part. We need to really look at it. And in addition to the radio, I would also enhance it. It's not about radio, because almost all the time we talk about 5G radio interface. It's not true. We need to look at it end-to-end, the backhauling, because if we don't upgrade the backhaul with the existing infrastructure, this is not going to serve the huge amount of data which is going to be generated. And also, if you don't really bring the edge cloud towards the user, you cannot really expect this kind of a latency. Latency, application, everything we are dreaming about, this is not going to happen. I mean, unless until we have to re-architect the network in a way that we have the edge cloud, centralized cloud, this software-defined networking, everything goes hand in hand. So this is also another learning that we need to take. Number 3, I would also say, this kind of a spectrum strategy. Yes, I know. Spectrum strategy, we need to look at it from the MITS perspective, because you cannot handle with a single, again, a spectrum strategy only mid-band will satisfy all the problems. You need to look at it from a millimeter wave, low band, because this is the way we can handle that. Again, depending on the use case, right? I think this is, if you tackle these kind of network challenges, this will help us to handle the traffic-related problems for the future. When it comes to the fiber, my view is it is going to coexist, because 5G probably can handle some of the fixed wireless access use cases from a last mile point of view, but it's not going to replace the fiber. Fiber is needed from the backhauling perspective, front hauling perspective, and also from the last mile where you have the existing infrastructure, you need to just upgrade for the gigabit speeds with the G-Fast, NG-PON, and all these technologies. So it's going to coexist.
So I ask a favor, 1 minute now each, yeah? Ibrahim, over to you.
Much less. You cannot have any G these days without massive fiber. And our plan for the new base stations is 10 gig per base station. We're at a gig with a fiber strand, right? So that's why when I talk about massive MIMO, the challenge being with multiple strands of fiber, that is the answering both your questions.
Thank you.
That's under a minute.
David?
So what's interesting with fiber, since as a last mile today is probably seen as be a complement of fiber as last mile, 5G as last mile complement to fiber. But then we can see that rapidly it can be also be seen as a competitor, because 5G will demonstrate capabilities which can be enough for the customers compared to fiber. And this also was already happening to 4G. Some customers not using TV are okay with 4G capabilities, which can happen with 5G. To end up with a kind of synthesis, I think we can see also 5G from fixed wireless access being as an enabler for convergence with fiber as well, with something which happened in Europe, not with 5G, but with wireless, which can also for the region be a booster for convergence. So 5G and fiber.
Thank you. Mohamed?
Yeah. I think for the reason for 5G, or is it 4G enough or not? So I agree. I guess we have networks globally that has 4G speed more than 5G speed in some of the countries. Like for example, in the US last week, T-Mobile launched 600 megahertz 5G. It was only 20% more speed than 4G. So you can tell now that the amount of traffic or the speed may not be the only justification that justify investing billions of money in the network. But we have to take into consideration that leadership has a price to pay. To be a pioneer, to be relevant in the marketplace, you need to deploy 5G. And also the passion about the country to leapfrog innovation, it's also fundamentally important. Last week I was in Vietnam. And Vietnam, they are planning and they wanted to get into 5G era, they wanted to deploy 5G. Why? They have the hope to leapfrog. Look at China. Look at China. In China, the government is really behind having 5G application, not just about the scale, it's about industry application, because they need to be leaders in the world and kind of scale those kind of applications. So country leadership, helping from the government and regulatory to serve or to encourage the operators to lower the spectrum price, to all of those things, will help in materializing the use case. But if you look at it from math perspective, I agree with you. I mean, 4G is getting a lot of money, a lot of applications, a lot of speed, a lot of capacity.
Thank you.
I'll pass because I think I've made my point on this. I think it's a bit, I take the point from Mohamed, but I think what you've said also has to be taken with a grain of salt because it could be a recipe for white elephants.
Yeah.
Meaning investments that do not become sustainable. And that, I think, is still a concern.
It's a potential. It's potential.
It's a potential, and I think whoever's taking that risk has to evaluate it.
Sure.
And you don't make these decisions simply because of, you want to be ahead of others. As long as you're sure you're running in the right direction, you want to be ahead of others. If we don't know what direction we're running in, I think we have to be a little bit more thoughtful.
Fair. Femi?
I don't disagree. Like I said, it's a gradual process. We think it's inevitable, will come. The issue is it a 2-3 year process or a 5-8 year process? In terms of fiber, it's always going to be more efficient than wireless. 5G, 6G, whatever it is, it's always going to be more efficient. So you want to take all that wireless traffic and as soon as possible, dump it on fiber. Now, if you think of an LTE cell site, some of them have a radius of 500 meters today. At its fullest potential, 5G, you could be talking of 50 meters. So 10x devices, access points have to be backhauled by fiber. That's almost a 10x in your last mile fiber. So they absolutely go hand in hand. The interesting thing to the point that was made earlier was that the venue, the campus. Now, I think that sort of localizes and helps us manage the building out a story for 5G because 80, 60, some people say 80% of traffic emanates indoor. So if you can get the indoor story right, the campus story right, think of it as a stadium, an office an office building, a hotel, or even some high-end residential. If you can get the use cases right there, the combination of 5G and fiber, hospitals, universities, you focus on those first and combine all your assets into getting addressing that, you've addressed a lot of the use cases, and then you would match your macro environment, and that way you have a more sensible investment strategy.
Thank you. I promised some fun for the regulatory people here, so this one is the last question. In between, we have one more. What are your next steps now, and when do you see 5G completely deployed? Which regions will be behind, and why?
I think 5G has started in the phase 1, and this is going to happen in multiple phases. So again, I will talk from the network point of view. So we had this non-standalone architecture. 5G is coexisting with the LTE. Next phase would be the standalone, where you need this low latency application, where you have a 5G radio connected with the 5G core, with the edge cloud and so on. This will happen in the next couple of years, I would say, because it starts next year, but going forward. And that will probably drive the next inflection point of multiple use cases where the low latency is the key factor, because standalone architecture is also critical from that perspective. So I see, if I strictly speaking from a Middle East point of view, this is definitely one of the pioneers for even adopting the new technology even from the standalone next phases. So I see Middle East is definitely one of the drivers behind this for the next phases as well.
Ibrahim? Silent?
Fast.
Yes.
Whoa! Okay.
I think it's for operators, 5G is an opportunity to change their ways they go to market. Because on technology we discuss, and we are more or less operators questioning is, what are the use cases? Can we monetize it? So more or less it's our problem, it's not the problem of the customers. What's interesting is that we said that the biggest opportunity was in enterprise markets. And I think 5G is an opportunity for obviously customers to get better of the technology, but also for operators to change their way they approach enterprise customers. If you look at the use case like the campus, the way an operator will sell a campus solution has nothing to do with connectivity. They're not going to sell SIMs, they're not going to sell packages, they're going to sell solutions. To sell solutions means for an operator to change the way they sell to the customers, to behave more an ICT company. It means to be able to run projects, to have salespeople which are able to sell solutions, understand customers' issues, customers' verticals. To do this means for customers to transform completely the way they approach the enterprise market. So we want to transform the networks, but it's business as usual with some supplement of technology. But to change the way they approach customers will mean deeper transformation, maybe acquisition, and what we have seen, a lot of operators acquiring ICT companies, not only to get the skills, but also to get the capability to approach customers a different way. So I think it's probably here the big change for operators is to go to a different way to the market, probably to reorganize part of their divisions and the way they sell, because they were not going to sell 5G the same way they were selling connectivity. At least it's an opportunity for them. They may lose it, and they will be, again, the same story as of 4G. So I think here's the challenge and the opportunity.
Thanks, David. Mohamed?
Yeah, I think for next year, what I'm hoping for is changing the conversation model between, let's take three entities like vendors, operators, and also industries. We always say, like operators, please, you understand what kind of industry you have to change the organization and go and talk to them. I guess why we do not encourage the industries to come and talk to operators to identify certain issues and work together to solve it. So it cannot be a buyer-seller model. Like if in Huawei, we do not approach telcos to like, okay, we wanted to sell this much equipment. This will not help. One of even the responsibilities that I have is starting top down, like these are the services that you can do, and this is much equipment that you will need in order to do it. Again, from the telco to the industry, it cannot be the telco approach, for example, certain enterprise as you are our customer, I want to sell you connectivity. That cannot help. What can help is operator, industry, come together, meet, okay, we have a certain issue, let's solve it. Maybe it will generate business to other entity, which is okay. So that's, I think, what will help Middle East. I guess we are leaders here in Middle East in deployments for coverage. Next year is going to be even like 1-to-1 from 4G and 5G, same number of base stations. What we need to do, changing the conversation and collaboration model between stakeholders.
Kamal?
I'll pass as well. I think I've already addressed this.
All right. I wasn't expecting that.
Well,
So we see that there will be a strong correlation between ARPU and 5G investments. I mean, we think that's just logical. So in the richer countries with the higher ARPUs, you see the bigger dollars, right? Now, in addition, however, much like MTN is doing, able to make money in lower ARPU revenue countries, there will be pockets where, say, 10% of their addressable subscriber base will be 5G enabled. And those are the pockets that would then need to be identified. So basically, one way or the other, 5G is going to go with the money.
Thank you. So now the tricky question. I will unveil who asked me to ask it, at least set the scene. Kamal came up with the idea, and I phrase it in the way. Every one of you could have 1 to maximum 2 wishes to a regulator of a country to help the 5G deployment. What would be that wish? As Kamal knows about this question, you are first.
Yeah, since I'm going to go first, I gave you the idea. I'm going to give you 4 or 5 wishes.
Wow.
First one is, I think, for regulators to understand that this is about innovation, and innovation means avoiding regulating before the innovation happens. So let's be a little bit humble, and rather than do things as usual, business as usual, I think regulators have to take a step back. Use this example. About 110 years ago, the Wright brothers took flight. If there were regulators at the time, they would have never taken flight, because the regulator would have told them, you need, over 100 hours of flight experience before you fly. You need to maintain contact with, with Earth, and you need a proper landing strip, and so on and so forth. Of course, these things did not exist. The world of 5G is something similar. We are going into uncharted territory, so do not overregulate. That is wish number 1. Second, where you have to regulate, understand that there's got to be some flexibility. Businesses, and we've talked about some uses of 5G uses for industries. It's not just another G, it's not just another data service. and you cannot regulate it the way you've regulated prices for mass market. Number three, I think this is very important. Always, it's got to be market driven. Whatever we do has to be driven by the market. There will be innovations that do not pan out. We will take risks, others will take risks. Some of it will survive, some of it will not. That's the nature of the game. However, when we invest and have to make big investments as countries, as operators, as societies, there has to be the expectation of a reasonable return, a sustainable business. You know, in 1996, 97, when mobile was deployed in other parts of the Middle East, the Gulf was a bit of a leader. In fact, from 94 on, every single study I saw of 2G said that you will reach a few thousand subscribers. That was the maximum. And you know, the consultants who prepared the studies were the same consultants you see, the big names, small names, everybody. We all underestimated the deployment of 2G. Same thing with 3G and the take-up of data. We may be, you know, today dealing with 5G that is just even, you know, we have fewer means of identifying that opportunity, so we have to take it step by step. I'm a technology optimist, but my optimism resides in a process that is market-driven, where innovation is allowed to grow, where innovation is not stunted by policies and regulations. And the last wish I would have is on the use of data. Data in 5G world is the most important driver of all of this. And data requires us, you know, we need to take a different approach to how we think about data. There is an ethical and moral dimension in many of these issues related to data, but there's also a business angle. And data today cannot be approached with the same kind of perspective of property rights, who owns it, whose is it, and so on and so forth. Data has to flow, data can be reused, data can circulate, and that's a good thing. And I think we need to, with regulators, with policymakers, come to an agreement where the way data is regulated is more or less uniform across markets. If you try to differentiate yourself and are tougher in your own jurisdiction, you end up putting your businesses or businesses based in your country at a disadvantage. And that is something that I see in some of the countries in the region, and it's a bit of a concern. So my advice on this point, again, is to go for what is, you know, good practice, try to align and have similar norms across markets as much as you can, so that your businesses based in your own jurisdiction can provide services across the board rather than be limited to a smaller market.
Thank you, Kamal. Femi?
Okay, I'll try to hit it quickly. One is spectrum. Please don't overcharge. Yeah, I mean, otherwise you kill the industry much like you did 3G. Second, I would say is promote infrastructure sharing and the like, facilitate, you know, the site acquisition and usage of existing assets such as lamp poles and ducts and so on, and help out. That's very often a limiting factor. Thirdly, controversially perhaps, I think in many countries in our region, we probably have excessive competition, and we've gotten to the point where it's no longer enabling growth and innovation. It's actually reducing. It's having the reverse effects. And you have several countries in our region with 6, 7 network operators, and it's just a tariff competition, and in the end, you don't have any 4G penetration. So don't over, competition is good, but only to the extent where it helps out. It helps a growing industry.
Agreed.
Very good point.
Aji?
Oh, okay. I think most of the topics are already covered. I think I can just highlight 2 things. One is, of course, about the spectrum, healthy environment for spectrum regulations in terms of pricing, in terms of usage, and so on. The second aspect would be the one thing what was mentioned by Dr. Kamal about the data privacy or security regulations, because the data is going to be the biggest item that we would have in the network, which could potentially foster a lot of innovation from the artificial intelligence or machine learning. So a lot of it we could use productively for enhancing the complete network experience. So this could be one of the things which I can suggest to work on from the regulator perspective.
Thank you. Ibrahim?
Just one wish, if the regulators are going to reverse engineer the use cases, it's very critical they fast forward 2 years from now and realize what their role would be. What are they doing about regulating AWS, Azure, GCP? If the cloud and the network and 5G are one, then I think we need to think of more than just spectrum, and it's very critical they would look at that use case and apply what they think their role should be. So ethical AI is something that we think is huge, and if green is huge, we should add that. And if we're cloudifying everything, it'd be great if they envision what Google will own versus an Etisalat or a TELUS or a Sofrecom, or that's very nice. Or a Vodafone. But you're moderating.
David?
Yeah, I really agree with this vision. I think it's, especially on the data side, we have to, if we ever regulate data from 5G, it must be seen as a whole, including data not generated by 5G, but all kind of data, to be consistent, not to put some actors at risk. And this is probably one of the biggest challenge on data, is to see it on the global basis, which includes OTT, and whatever the location of the data is, so see it as a full picture.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Mohamed?
We always call for innovation from technologists. We always call for innovation from businessmen. We also need to ask regulatories to innovate. So policy should be innovative as well. So that's number one. Number two, policy should be targeting only one target. Put the country ICT position on top and elevate it, right? So whatever policy help in putting that on top should be taken into consideration. Last point is cross-regulation between different industry. We cannot just focus on telecom. Regulation needs to be across telecom industry, energy industry, whatever, and so that even the government and organization need to talk together. The whole 5G thing is about the power of collaboration and the value for conversation between any entities. So those are my wish for next year.
Thank you very much for that one.
Thank you.
So as we have cut you, but Ibrahim, hey, the other one we're overrunning. Ibrahim, very briefly, because you were cut off so brutally. Do you have any more questions to the others? Because you had the wish to be educated by especially the vendors on the panel, which I liked a lot.
maybe tonight over a glass of wine.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Any last?
No, I think it was a fantastic experience to work on this.
So, any questions here in the panel?
They're hungry.
I think it's
so. What's for lunch? I guess.
But they're all here. I'm really impressed. No questions to the panel?
What's for lunch is the main question.
Yeah. Anything from you?
We're all good.
Thank you very much. Thanks for patiently wait.
Thank you, Johan. Beautifully done.